No assistant for me? Let's see how that works out. This happened almost 15 years ago when I was still living in my home country. I worked in a warehouse that served as a distribution center for a supermarket chain. A very famous one, by the way. I was an inspector in the shipping department. Basically, the sorting section would bring to the docks the goods that the store had requested, and we would prepare and load the shipment onto the truck. In the shipping department, there were assistants who did the manual work, assembling the loads on pallets, wrapping them with stretch film, and loading them onto the truck, while the inspector checked whether everything being sent to the store was correctly labeled and secure for transport. Additionally, the inspector entered all data in the internal system, sealed the truck, and printed the load summary for the administrative department to generate an invoice. Of course, inspectors also helped the assistants with the heavy lifting. Most of the time, this didn't interfere with our main responsibilities and actually sped up the process, especially since our shift, the afternoon shift, had an issue with trucks arriving late. Many times, we wouldn't finish everything on time, leading to overtime and sometimes having to leave the remaining work for the night shift, which wasn't ideal since each shift had its own list of stores to attend to, and this delay affected them. Each inspector worked with at least one assistant, but sometimes more, depending on their workload. Some inspectors had more stores to handle that day, some stores required extra loads, or other situations that called for additional help. We had a supervisor who had been with the company for many years and had worked in the department before being promoted. The job was great, and everything ran smoothly, until a crisis hit another department, leaving it without a supervisor. Management decided they needed someone experienced to lead that department, so they transferred our supervisor there. In his place, they promoted someone from another department who had no leadership experience. Our department was running well, with no need for drastic changes. But our new supervisor didn't see it that way. One day, I arrived at work, and as usual at the beginning of the shift, the supervisor printed out a sheet listing the stores to be handled that day, along with which inspector was assigned to each one. So far, so good. He made some changes, but nothing too concerning. However, before we started working, he called the entire department for a quick meeting. In this meeting, he announced that he had reassigned which assistants would work with which inspectors and showed us a printed list. To my surprise, there was no name next to mine. In other words, I was expected to work without an assistant. I protested immediately. I don't remember the exact details of the discussion, as it happened a long time ago, but basically, his idea was that as other assistants finished helping their assigned inspectors, whoever was available would come help me. Something that already happened naturally, as we had a strong sense of camaraderie in our department. Plus, no one wanted to be seen by the bosses standing around doing nothing. But it wasn't enough. It would overburden me. I tried to argue my case, but I couldn't convince him. Other inspectors were also left without assistance, but they were relatively new to the company and didn't say anything, probably out of fear of losing their jobs or something similar. Well, since I couldn't change his mind, I accepted that I would be working without an assistant. I took the signs for the stores I was responsible for, found available docks for them, placed the signs on the dock gates, noted on the printed sheet which stores were at which docks, then went to the dock of the first store I would handle. I leaned against the wall, crossed my arms, and waited. Goods started arriving, but I didn't touch a single box. The dock filled up, and I didn't move an inch. After a few hours, the supervisor walked through the department to check on things, saw the state of my dock, and asked why the load wasn't being prepared. I simply said, "I don't have any assistants, how am I supposed to prepare the load?" and remained standing with my arms crossed. Eventually, some assistants came to help me, and when they did, I helped them with the heavy lifting. But soon, the inspectors they were originally assigned to needed more help, and of course, they left my load behind. By the end of the shift, one load was ready to be loaded onto the truck, but another was only halfway done. I placed the paperwork with the load details in a visible spot for whoever would finish it and left. As I was leaving, my supervisor asked about the loads. Without turning around, I told him where the papers were. He asked if I wasn't going to finish them, and I didn't even respond. The next day, he called me in for a meeting. When I arrived, the manager was also there. They asked me what had happened the previous day. I replied, "Nothing that I remember." They brought up the incomplete loads. I explained that my shift had ended, and I couldn't stay for overtime, so I left the information for whoever would finish the job, and I even told the supervisor where the papers were. Then, I took out my wallet, pulled out my time card receipt, and showed them that I had clocked out at the designated time. They mentioned that I had spent most of the shift standing with my arms crossed. I responded that I had done my job, which, as stated in my contract, consisted solely of verifying the load, supervising assembly and loading, entering data into the system, sealing the truck, and printing the load summary. Nothing beyond that. I continued by saying that anything else I might do during my shift was purely out of goodwill to help the assistants and speed up the work. But on the previous day, I had chosen to exercise my right not to perform those extra tasks because I felt unfairly treated by my supervisor, who had not assigned me a dedicated assistant. That would have significantly overburdened me with tasks I wasn't paid to do. The manager simply looked at the supervisor and said, "He needs to have an assistant." Then he turned to me and asked me to leave. The two of them stayed there for quite a while. That same day, I was assigned an assistant, and we never spoke of it again. Nothing like that ever happened again. The new supervisor's stint lasted only a few months before he returned to his previous role. He had put too much trust in employees he was friends with, but who weren't very competent at their jobs, and that was his downfall. Our old supervisor came back to his position, and everything improved again. Turn my camera on? Fine. In 2021, I was working on a project with this manager called Mark, who was a real stickler for the rules. He was the kind of dude who wouldn't allow chit-chat in his team and loved an office day more than anything, despite the fact that our team was external and all of us lived crazy far away. I've got a chronic disease which, at the time, was kept relatively under control with infusions at the hospital every few weeks. Seeing as Mark didn't want to chit-chat, he wasn't aware that I lived with this disease. One day I was in the hospital, working from the bed with a cannula in one arm. We had our daily meeting planned, and I figured it would be fine to call in without my camera, as they could still hear me just fine, and I didn't want to freak anyone out with the infusion line in the picture and whatnot. I get onto the call, and Mark immediately comments that he can't see my face. I tell him that I've not got my camera on today and don't elaborate, figuring that it's a 15-minute call and I could just as easily be driving or something. Mark responds by asking me to stay back on the call after we finish. I comply, and he chews me out for not turning on my camera, saying that it's a rule that we all need to show our faces. Fine. I turn on my camera and watch his face go from red to white as he sees me in what is very clearly a hospital room. I tell him I'm uncomfortable being on camera while I'm getting treatment, also not elaborating on what it's for. His sweaty little face still brings me joy. It was a really nice moment to bask in, and I think about it pretty often when I get managers who like rules just a little too much. Boss wants more words on the comment for each ticket solved. Engineer writes a novel. I've been working on IT for around 25 to 26 years now. Different companies, but you see quite a bit of MC on the IT world. Back in 2005-06 I worked for a telephone company, a huge one, that had the typical Jira-like bug reporting tool for one of its most complicated and convoluted softwares. The software was so complex, so legacy, that even the development team in-house was afraid to do changes in it. Some updates in the past did backfire spectacularly more than once, so even the tiniest update to that software had to take weeks of analysis before taking place. In that dev team worked 3 of my friends from college. I worked on another one that had an easier life. One of my guys at that team was Bedu. To portray Bedu accurately, imagine that guy that's always playing innocent pranks, that you never know if he's for real when he's talking because he's always saying the most shocking things just for the LOLs, knows a little bit of magic, uses it to prank, loves football, soccer, as well. He used to be good at his job, but he's also a quite bit tired of it, procrastinating and, generally, not putting too much effort on it. The fact that he's part of that software dev team doesn't help. It's not a fast-paced environment and people gets bored by the inaction. So, since he's bored, he plays pranks, like connecting a second wireless mouse controller to the PC of a colleague to randomly move the mouse and have him call tech support because his mouse misbehaves but do absolutely nothing with the mouse when tech support comes. The guy being the target of the prank ended up calling tech support 4 times before being told what was going on. The team once a week also books a windowless meeting room for an hour, so 3 of them can take a nap while the 4th one guards against someone finding out. Who's the guard rotates each week. The requests for update Bedu gets are almost always something in this style. This report indicates that X value is 25, when it should be 27, please fix. Each request typically comes from a different area, but each area sends a couple of requests probably once a month. But Bedu knows that the algorithm doing that calculation is extremely complex. Reports are baked on a monthly basis on batch processes that can take hours. Testing this is extremely painful also, so he updates the end value on the report, where it was 25, now is 27. Easy peasy, see you next month. He gets probably like 10 to 15 of these requests per day. Bedu updates the bug tool ticket stating, on the comment field, something like end value verified and corrected, and moves on. New boss comes to that dev team from another team on the company. He's well known around the company as being quite dense. He instantly clashes with the team. He thinks quantity equals quality and loves to look into numbers. He comes from the database world, so he's constantly using queries to gather information. He also thinks that each ticket solved is because the underlying condition is being solved. He knows nothing about the complexity of the system. He just thinks that the team is really good at identifying causes and solving them fast. Glorified pencil pusher. He gathers the team and says that he did a query and found out that the comments being put into the bug tool are really short, like less than 50 characters long, and that is not enough to explain what has been done to solve the incident. The whole team explains that what's being put into the comment field is more than enough. He says that comments should, at least, have 1,000 characters. It's the minimum he'll accept. He says that having comments with less than 1,000 characters will impact his valuation of the work being done. Bedu, being the devious character he is, decides to complain. Especially since he knows that boss would never open the bug tool. He loves his databases. First ticket comes in. This value is this. Should be that. He updates value, writes the same comment he always does, end value verified and corrected, and then, taking advantage on the fact that the comment field has format capabilities, WYSIWYG type of editor, copies and pastes the chronicle from the latest football match into the field, changes the color to white and the font size to 1, so it can't be seen against the background on the tool, and closes the ticket. If you're the original ticket poster, that comment field is read-only, so unless someone selects and highlights the comment, they won't know that something else is there. Next ticket comes, does the same but writes a rant about some stupid thing. Then on the next ticket, he just keeps pushing random keys and the spacebar until the character counter reaches 1,000. He gets bored of doing this, so he becomes more ingenious and inventive by the ticket. Somewhere hidden in that bug tool comment system, a complete original Bedu novel separated in small chapters ends up being written that no one knows about, outside of us few that have lunch with Bedu and the team. Boss comes a month after and says to Bedu, I've noticed that the size of your comments has gone up last month. You're averaging well over 1,000 characters per ticket. Keep it up. Bedu, plus all my other friends and myself, left the company to greener pastures a year later. I still talk daily with Bedu and people from that team. Thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, make sure to give a thumbs up, subscribe, and ring the bell for more videos. See you soon again.